gives me great pleasure at the outset to congratulate you and the Republic of the Maldives on your election as President of the 76th session of the United Nations General Assembly. I assure you of our full support in all tasks that would facilitate your work. I would also like to seize the opportunity to express our sincere gratitude for the tremendous effort of your predecessor, His Excellency Mr. Volkan Bozkır, during his presidency of the 75th session. I should also like to congratulate His Excellency Mr. Antonio Guterres on his re-election as Secretary General of the United Nations, which is a recognition of his remarkable effort in leading this august organization during his first term. The last year of which has witnessed a multifaceted, grave challenge that has claimed countless lives and caused much material and moral damage. Mr. President, our world is still in deep mourning due to COVID-19, a pandemic of global reach and excessive destructive ability. It claims human lives without distinction. It sends successive shock waves that upend the core of modern lifestyles in their various humanitarian, political, economic, and environmental aspects. A quick glance at the figures and statistics recorded worldwide shows the magnitude of the scars that will remain present for a long time on our collective conscience. It shows casualties that have surpassed 4.5 million people and confirmed recorded cases exceeding 231 million cases, as well as the crippling burden placed on health sectors and professionals who deserve our greatest appreciation for their dedication and work in the front lines, despite the horrors that threatened the collapse of many health systems across the world. This is in addition to the exacerbation of the food insecurity crisis due to the disruption in supply lines, which came as an expected outcome of the severe economic downturn and stagnation, unheard of in over 90 years. Further, we saw a decline in the services of the education sector, in particular in developing and least developed countries, in such a way that threatens more than ever to reverse the gains made and waste achievements of the Sustainable Development Goals. Mr. President, any study of history will show that epidemics, despite the gravity of their effects, have played pivotal roles as major catalysts for change and for building back better at the political, economic, and social levels. From this standpoint, the COVID-19 pandemic was like a mirror that reflected the world's weaknesses and revealed its chronic flaws, among which are the increase in hunger and poverty rates, prolonged conflicts, unchecked advances in modern technology with ramifications on cyber security, and the spread of the scourge of terrorism, as well as the mounting structural disparities and gaps among countries. All these challenges have put multilateralism to an existential test of survival or decline and stagnation. Perhaps one of the most positive changes brought about by the pandemic was the emergence of modern patterns of creativity, innovation, adaptation that have contributed to creating rapid responses and advanced forms of cooperation within societies and between countries. This is in addition to the breakthrough in scientific research that was manifested in the race to defeat the virus through the production of multiple vaccines that have proved their effectiveness in providing the required immunization empirically with encouraging figures. Yet, much hinges upon the ability of the international community to make optimal use of this crisis towards a better transformation for our world in a serious endeavor for a sustainable and equitable recovery where no one is left behind. Mr. President, recovery requires starting with several steps, most important among which is giving utmost priority to investing in data and information infrastructure, as the availability of digital evidence will contribute to enhancing decision-making processes in the programs and policies aimed at mobilizing resources and post-crisis rebuilding in order to shield societies from similar future crises. However, the most important and urgent step is finding fair and secure distribution patterns of vaccines to all countries towards achieving universal immunization. In this regard, the state of Kuwait has achieved one of the highest global vaccination rates of 72% for our nationals and expatriates alike. We are also able to protect our health system from collapsing. My country continues to support international efforts to fight the COVID-19 pandemic with total contributions of $327.4 million, the latest of which was providing $40 million to the Gavi Alliance and the COVAX Facility Initiative towards enhancing global health security. Mr. President, the question of Palestine remains central to our Arab and Muslim worlds. Tension and instability will continue in our region if the Palestinian people do not obtain all their legitimate political rights, and if Israel, the occupying power, continues its practices and violations of international humanitarian law. These violations include the building of settlements, confiscation of land, closure of territories, the continued blockade on Gaza, and the desecration of the sanctity of holy places. We stress the importance of continuing to exert efforts to restart the negotiations within a set time frame towards a just and comprehensive peace, according to the terms of reference of the peace process, the resolutions of international legitimacy, and the Arab Peace Initiative, with a view to ending the Israeli occupation and the establishment of an independent Palestinian state with East Jerusalem as its capital along the borders prior to the 4th of June 1967, and the return of the refugees. At the same time, we commend the indispensable role of UNRWA in providing basic assistance to millions of Palestinian refugees and stress the importance of continuing to support its work. Mr. President, the ongoing Syrian crisis, which has entered its 11th year, with all the humanitarian suffering for Syrians inside and outside the country, has proved that the absence of international consensus and will, as well as external intervention, have all prolonged this brutal conflict. Here we reiterate our principled conviction that there is no military solution to the crisis. We emphasize the importance of reaching a political settlement in accordance with relevant Security Council resolutions, especially Resolution 2254, in a way that meets the aspirations and hopes of the brotherly Syrian people. Mr. President, the continuing crisis in brotherly Yemen and the growing and dangerous threats it poses to regional peace and stability are testament to how relevant Security Council resolutions and outcomes are addressed in practice. Hence, we stress our firm position that the only solution to this crisis is a political one, based on the three agreed-upon terms of reference, namely the GCC initiative and its implementation mechanism, the outputs of the National Dialogue Conference, and the resolutions of the Security Council, especially Resolution 2216. We also renew our support to the Special Envoy of the Secretary General to Yemen. At the same time, we welcome the constructive role of the sisterly Kingdom of Saudi Arabia towards the implementation of the Riyadh Agreement, as well as its initiative for peace in Yemen. We express our condemnation of all aggressions and attacks against Saudi territory and reaffirm our support to all measures taken by the Kingdom to maintain its security and stability. Mr. President, the Libyan Political Dialogue Forum election earlier this year of a head and deputies for its Presidency Council, as well as of a Prime Minister, is an encouraging sign that the international community, through the UN, is able to make headway towards a difficult peace that was elusive due to 7 years of severe institutional divisions with serious repercussions on the security and stability of Libya and countries in the region. We call upon our Libyan brothers to give priority to the best interest of the country, as well as peaceful solutions that reject violence. They must commit to the outcomes of international conferences and relevant Security Council resolutions to ensure concluding all necessary arrangements for holding the general elections on time on the 24th of December 2021. We expect that these efforts and arrangements would ensure the security, stability, and unity of Libya and meet the aspirations of the brotherly people of Libya. Mr. President, the pandemic has had political, social, and economic repercussions that diverted the attention of the world, which was exploited by extremist and terrorist groups in conflict-affected or fragile and insecure areas. The Middle East, in particular, has suffered from the destruction and sabotage of terrorist organizations, mainly the ISIL terrorist organization. This led to an intensification of the war on this clear and present danger in all its forms and manifestations, as we work to dry up its funding and implement international and regional counterterrorism conventions. Many countries in our region are suffering from this growing threat in Yemen, Libya, Syria, Somalia, and Iraq. The international community has followed with much interest the critical recent developments in Afghanistan. We call upon the Taliban and all parties to exercise utmost restraint to protect lives and also to provide full protection for civilians. We also call upon them to strictly adhere to obligations and international law, to maintain stability and security in the country, and to uphold the rights and gains of the friendly people of Afghanistan. At the regional level, based on our principled position rooted in the rules of good neighborliness set forth in the Charter of the United Nations, we reiterate our call to the Islamic Republic of Iran to take serious steps towards confidence building in a dialogue based on respect for the sovereignty of states and non-interference in their domestic affairs, towards diffusing tension in the Gulf and maintaining the safety, security, and freedom of maritime navigation from any threats. This would contribute towards establishing relations based on mutual respect and cooperation, which paves the way for the realization of the aspirations of the peoples of the region towards security, stability, prosperity, and development. I turn to a thorny regional question. The erosion of the nuclear disarmament regime is an existential threat to the security and stability of the region. We look forward to the concerted international and regional efforts towards the successful holding of the second session of the Conference on establishing a nuclear weapons and WMDs free zone in the Middle East, which the state of Kuwait will preside over, to be held in New York in November 2021. Mr. President, the current COVID-19 pandemic continues to deprive countries of the gains made towards the SDGs. It has shown that different aspects of sustainability are interlinked. Hence, the issue of climate change and ecosystems was also subject to its waves. In this regard, we expect the UN Climate Change Conference to be held in Glasgow next month to reach a constructive review to track progress made and identify shortcomings based on the principle of common but differentiated responsibility towards ending environmental degradation exacerbated by marked increases in temperatures, severe storms, and floods, as well as deforestation due to fires in a number of countries, which would have severe environmental repercussions. In conclusion, I reiterate our adherence to the international multilateral system and to the principles and purposes of the United Nations Charter to ensure the development and strengthening of international governance, to guarantee the realization of the noble mission of the UN towards the maintenance of international peace and security, and to serve all of mankind. May the peace and blessings of Allah be upon you.
On behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the State of Kuwait for the statement just made, and I request protocol to escort His Excellency. The Assembly will hear an address by Her Excellency Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia. May I request protocol to escort Her Excellency. I have great pleasure in welcoming Her Excellency Ana Brnabić, Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia. I invite her to address the General Assembly.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, Mr. Secretary General, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I have the great honor to address you today on behalf of the citizens of the Republic of Serbia. Esteemed Excellencies, Mr. Abdullah Shahid, Mr. Volkan Bozkır, and Mr. Antonio Guterres, I would like to thank you for the active engagement, dedication, and leadership you have shown for the United Nations and all of humanity during these difficult times. Serbia shares your conviction, and we remain fully committed to supporting your efforts. This year, we come together at a decisive moment in our history. COVID-19 has shaken our foundations to the core. At the same time, we are increasingly witnessing and experiencing the effects of climate change. And finally, we are seeing significant shifts in global partnerships and alliances, trade wars between traditional partners and allies, protectionism instead of openness and free market policies, and overall uncertainty at an unprecedented scale. Some of the pressing and extremely emotional issues that we have locally in the Balkans are still unresolved. And while we are trying, and Serbia is especially dedicated to this, to change the future by working together and creating alliances through initiatives such as the Berlin Process and Open Balkans Initiative, others are trying to disrupt these processes, and instead of focusing on the future, they want to recreate the past. whatever the cost of that may be. But let me start with COVID. The COVID-19 pandemic has exposed critical weaknesses in the architecture of global governance. It has threatened to erase the progress many nations have achieved in recent years. It has placed nations at the junction between isolation and collaboration, between panic and hope, between chaos and order. The pandemic questioned some of the basic tenets of the open and cooperative international order. Global exchanges, international communication, and cross-border trade have all seen a vast decrease. Curfews, restrictions on freedom and lockdowns of entire societies have created uncertainty in many segments of the individual lives of our citizens, and for that matter, our own individual perception of what freedom in today's world even means. For Serbia, this pandemic threatened to undermine everything we have been doing for the past 7 years, to crush all of the results and accomplishments of difficult reforms we initiated in 2014, and to propel us back to the times of high unemployment, rising public debt, uncontrollable deficit, and overall desperation. Much as in any other country, COVID-19 has tested our nation's resiliency. And this time, unlike during the global financial crisis, which was still much more limited in scope and incomparable in consequences to the COVID-19 pandemic, this time, Serbia stood strong. The reforms we undertook in the pre-COVID times made us more resilient than ever. The fiscal consolidation, the budget surplus we had, efficient and predictable investment environment became a lifeline that saved us from a recession during the pandemic, and one that ensured we could support our citizens and our economy during these most difficult of times. Despite the effects of the crisis, Serbia has managed to preserve financial and economic stability. In 2020, we recorded a decline in GDP of only 0.9%, one of the best results in Europe. Our public debt remained below 60% of our GDP. Average salary continued to grow by almost 10%, while despite the pandemic, the number of people employed increased by over 3%. The recovery this year has been stronger than we expected. Our GDP will grow approximately 7% and perhaps by even more. Prior to the pandemic, we have opened our borders to investment, technology, and ideas, and we managed to create a peaceful and stable environment that allowed us to pursue rapid domestic transformation with innovation and knowledge-based economy as the foundation. The innovative advances we have made allowed us to diversify our capabilities when the virus hit, through e-government, online education, digital textbooks, and a central software system which drove a successful vaccination rollout. We invested heavily in healthcare infrastructure and strengthened the health system in order to respond to the current crisis, and are eternally grateful to our healthcare workers for their dedicated struggle. Our decision to put geopolitics aside and people at the center of our policies is the reason we were able to acquire vaccines quicker than most other nations. We did not discriminate between manufacturers, did not care whether vaccines are from the East or West, but chose to negotiate with all vaccine manufacturers deemed safe by regulators. This openness gave us the ability to purchase vaccines from around the world, giving our citizens the unique freedom to choose which vaccine they prefer. Excellencies, Serbia believes in solidarity between nations, multilateralism, and helping others when in need. Since the beginning of this year, we have made it our mission to support our neighbors and all those in need with COVID-19 vaccines. We have also allowed foreign nationals to come to Serbia to receive the vaccine which will protect their lives. In total, Serbia has donated or allocated over 1 million doses of vaccines, 230,000 doses for the region, 300,000 doses for foreign nationals who came to Serbia to get vaccinated, and an additional 570,000 doses for countries of Africa and Asia. And we will keep doing so to the greatest extent possible until COVID-19 is behind all of us. This is why we have also taken steps to acquire the technology to produce at least 2 types of vaccines to help improve global access so we can all be safe and triumph over this virus. However, as stated by dignitaries of some of the largest nations during this General Assembly, there are other pressing issues that all of us need to keep addressing without any delay and in a bold manner. And the most urgent is climate change. Serbia has redoubled its efforts to make our country safer and cleaner for its citizens, and by doing so, contribute to the fight against climate change and for environmental protection. We are strongly committed to the implementation of the Sustainable Development Goals and the Paris Agreement on climate change. We are committed to global efforts and will continue to work actively to meet our obligation under the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change. We are about to submit our revised nationally determined contributions to contribute to this critical global effort. We have already announced our intention to reduce greenhouse gases by at least 33.3% compared to 1990 and 13.2% compared to 2010, which we are currently incorporating into our energy and climate strategic documents. We work strategically on planning and investments in this sector. These investments are extremely expensive, requiring years and decades of commitment and a systematic approach. But we are firmly set on the path of this transformation. Ladies and gentlemen, of all the challenges we face, the most worrisome for Serbia is the maintenance of peace and stability in the southern Serbia province of Kosovo and Metohija. For more than 2 decades, we have been constantly drawing international attention to the problems that the non-Albanian population is facing in Kosovo and Metohija. Physical safety and respect for and protection of human rights, and especially of minority communities, are far from satisfactory. We are now witnessing a constant increase in the number of attacks targeting Serbs, their property, and religious heritage in Kosovo and Metohija. To illustrate, there were 55 such incidents in 2014, 62 in 2016, 71 in 2020, and 100 since the beginning of this year. The total number of attacks in 2020 was already surpassed by June of this year. According to the United Nations, Kosovo and Metohija is still the territory with the least number of returnees, internally displaced Serbs, of all post-conflict areas in the entire world. I will give you just a few examples to depict what the lives of Serbs in Kosovo and Metohija look like today. On the 11th of May, the house of Radoje Pumpalović, 81-year-old returnee to Kosovo in the village of Dubrava in the Istok municipality, was attacked. This was the 5th attack on him in the same year. And again, I emphasize, he's 81 years old. Since June 2021, multiple attacks were carried out against Dragica Gašić, a 59-year-old woman, the first Serb returnee to Đakovica, 22 years after the end of the conflict. Attacks include stoning of her apartment, banning her from shopping for food in the local store, and petitions by civil society organizations demanding her eviction from the city. On the 2nd of July, in the village of Vojbulja, near Vučitrn, a group of Albanians attacked 13-year-old Nikola Perić. The attack occurred when he was returning home from the school playground with 3 friends. Attacks on Serbian medieval churches, monasteries, and monuments in Kosovo and Metohija make them some of the most endangered cultural heritage sites in Europe. The monastery Visoki Dečani was recently listed by Europa Nostra as one of the 7 most endangered heritage sites in Europe in 2021. The advisory panel of Europa Nostra noted that Dečani is the only monument in Europe under robust military protection for a continuous period of 20 years, although it constitutes a monument of ultimate historical and cultural importance for Europe and the world. This spiral of violence occurring in Kosovo and Metohija culminated at the beginning of this week. On the pretext of enforcing new license plate rules, Pristina dispatched heavily armed special units to the north of province. This is yet another brutal violation of the Brussels Agreement, and this irrational show of force has ignited a major crisis. It disrupted the supply of food and medication to Serb communities in the north of the province. Local Serbs, who peacefully gathered to protest this measure, were met with tear gas and police brutality, thus seriously threatening local and regional stability. But despite all of the challenges and daily provocations, Serbia remains strongly committed to finding a compromise-based solution that will ensure lasting peace and stability. Dialogue and the implementation of the agreements reached are the only proper way to resolve all open issues. However, almost 9 years after reaching the Brussels Agreement, as the first agreement on normalization between Belgrade and Pristina, the establishment of the Community of Serb Municipalities, the very backbone of this agreement, has not yet even begun. And I would like to appeal once again to the international community and especially to the European Union as the guarantor of the Brussels Agreement to firmly insist that the provisional institutions of self-government in Pristina start implementing all of the agreements reached. The Republic of Serbia, by defending its sovereignty and territorial integrity, at the same time defends international law, the UN Charter, the legally binding UN Security Council Resolution 1244, and the supreme authority of the Security Council when it comes to the preservation of international peace and stability. We attach special importance to the activity of the UN mission in Kosovo and Metohija and expect it to continue to implement its mandate in the province in accordance with this resolution. Dear friends, our generation shares the common destiny of the modern world, which is becoming increasingly complex in terms of geopolitics, technology, health, and climate. In the face of these challenges, Serbia will continue nurturing international partnerships on a predictable and transparent basis. We will continue pursuing rule of law reforms on our EU path, which is our strategic foreign policy goal. We see this as inseparable from achieving sustainable peace, stability, and prosperity. We will host, together with the Republic of Azerbaijan, as the current chair of the Non-Aligned Movement, a commemorative high-level event marking the 60th anniversary of the Non-Aligned Movement Conference, which was held in Belgrade in 1961. And we are very much looking forward to hosting our friends from all parts of the world in Belgrade in October this year. We will further enhance cooperation across the Balkans through the Open Balkans Initiative and Berlin Process, by opening borders, harmonizing differences, and further integrating our region. And in conclusion, over the past 7 years, Serbia has been transformed. We sparked an economic revival, created opportunities for young people, cultivated a tech boom, and improved Serbia's position abroad. The progress we have made has allowed Serbia to better face and survive the pandemic. The world now faces a turning point. The recovery from COVID-19 and sustainable reconstruction will not proceed if issues, new and old, are not handled by joint forces and collaborative international actions. This pandemic taught us one important lesson. Unless all of us are safe, no one is safe. So we can either win together, or all of us, regardless of how rich or poor, large or small, from Europe, Asia, Africa, America, or Australia, or fail together. If anything, the COVID-19 pandemic, as well as the issue of climate change, should have taught us to stand together. Thank you very much.
Au nom de l'Assemblée générale,
on behalf of the General Assembly, I wish to thank the Prime Minister of the Republic of Serbia for the statement just made. I ask protocol to accompany Her Excellency. I now give the floor to the representative of Denmark to introduce the statement by the head of government.
The honor and privilege of introducing a pre-recorded statement by Her Excellency, Mrs. Mette Frederiksen, Prime Minister of Denmark.
Mr. President, dear delegates, no one can be in doubt. We live in a connected world. We face global challenges. They can only be solved if we work together. COVID-19, human rights violations, climate change, poverty on the rise, conflicts. As a founding member of the UN, Denmark is a strong voice for common solutions. And today we need global cooperation more than ever. Throughout history, international solidarity has moved us forward. It has the power to do so again. Out of the pandemic, we must ensure global access to vaccines. None of us can leave COVID behind until all of us can. Denmark is committed to vaccine solidarity and COVAX. In the spring, we announced the donation of 3 million vaccine doses. This week, we announce a redoubling of our efforts. We now aim to donate more than 6 million doses. That is more than one donated vaccine for each Dane. It comes in addition to our commitment to COVAX with more than $15 million. If we are to battle this pandemic, we have to strengthen our ability to prevent and respond to future pandemics. International solidarity also has the power to prevent a climate disaster. The latest IPCC report makes it clear that we are standing at a global crossroad. We must continue our path towards a green future, and we have to do it faster. We need to keep the Paris Agreement goal alive, limiting the global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees. Climate change hits the world's poorest and weakest communities hardest. Denmark will respond to the call of the Secretary General and massively scale up Danish grant-based climate finance to at least $500 million a year by 2023. And we are dedicating 60% to adaptation in poor and vulnerable countries. In addition, we are strengthening our efforts to mobilize public and private finance from other sources. In total, Denmark aims to contribute at least 1% of the collective target of $100 billion. At the same time, we are fully focused on reducing our own emissions. Denmark will be climate neutral no later than 2050. And by 2030, we have committed to cut our greenhouse gas emissions by 70%. We have decided to end production of oil and gas and build the world's first energy island. In time, they will create clean energy for millions of European households. We call on you all to follow and to do so urgently. Every one of us needs to act and adapt, but we also have to act for the common good. That is the case in Afghanistan as well. The current situation is disturbing for the long-suffering people of Afghanistan, for the women and children, and also for the international society. We need a strong and coordinated response. The contribution at the International Donor Conference last week was an important step. I would like to express my appreciation for the commitment of our international humanitarian partners. They are providing life-saving assistance in Afghanistan and in the many other places. Thank you. Peace missions are keeping peace, preventing conflicts, and paving the way for progress every day around the world. No people in conflict zones should be forgotten. We must include those that have been excluded and empower those that have been powerless.